The marketplace of Lura Station was never quiet. Merchants shouted, colors flashed, and the smell of strange food mixed with smoke in the air. Hundreds of alien species moved between the stalls, each with their own shapes, voices, and habits. Among them walked a single human, his boots echoing on the metallic floor. For most aliens, a human was a rare sight. Some had only heard of them in stories told by travelers. Others had seen pictures but never close. The man moved with calm confidence, holding something small in his hand. Something shiny that caught the light. An alien girl named Alira noticed him first. She had smooth blue skin, glowing lines along her arms, and eyes that shimmered like liquid silver. She had been searching for food when her gaze froze on the object in the human's hand. It was sharp, metallic, with strange teeth at its end. Her heart raced, she whispered to herself. A hidden blade. Fear spread quickly through her body. She had grown up hearing tales of humans, how they survived wars by using tools no alien could understand. She thought this must be one of those terrible human weapons. Her pulse quickened as she stepped back, nearly knocking over a fruit vendor. The vendor followed her gaze and saw the fork glinting in the man's hand. His eyes widened, his voice rose in panic. Weapon, weapon, the human carries a weapon, he shouted. The sound traveled through the crowded market like fire. Whispers turned to cries, cries turned to screams. Dozens of aliens scattered, hiding behind stalls and walls. The human stopped, confused. He looked around at the sudden chaos. He saw merchants slamming shutters, guards rushing forward with energy spears glowing. He frowned, lifting his hand slowly. In his right hand was the object of fear, the fork Alira's breath caught. She stared at him, trembling, her thoughts spinning. Why did he bring such a thing here? In the middle of their marketplace, her instincts told her to run. But something in her heart forced her to stay. Her silver eyes locked on the man's calm expression. He didn't look like a killer, but the tool in his hand spoke another story. The guards surrounded him, their voices loud and commanding. Drop the weapon, human, surrender it at once. The crowd watched with wide eyes. Mothers pulled their children close. Merchants gripped their own tools for defense. Everyone believed the human had come to harm them. But the man didn't move to fight. Instead, he looked at the fork in his hand, then at the alien staring in terror. He spoke in a clear but soft voice. This is not a weapon. But his words were not understood. Their languages clashed, the meaning lost. To them, his voice only sounded firm and dangerous. Alira stepped closer, her knees weak, her mind caught between fear and strange curiosity. She wanted to see the object more clearly. It was simple, thin, with 4 sharp teeth, but it did not hum with energy, nor glow with plasma like a true weapon. Still, it looked dangerous enough. Her people had no tools shaped like that. Why would anyone carry such a thing openly? The human slowly crouched, placing the fork gently on the ground before him. The sound of metal touching stone rang sharp in the tense air. The guards hesitated, unsure if it was a trick. The alien crowd leaned forward. Breaths held tight, Alira whispered again, her voice shaking. What kind of weapon is it? Why does it look so small? Her fear was mixed with wonder now. If humans could hide deadly power in something so tiny, then maybe the old stories were true. Maybe humans were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The human raised both hands, showing he meant no harm. But one guard stepped forward and picked up the fork with shaking claws. He held it high, displaying it like proof of danger. The crowd gasped, murmurs spreading like waves. The guard declared, "We will take him to the council. Let them judge this hidden weapon." The human's eyes darkened with frustration. He had no way to explain himself, no way to tell them this was only a simple eating tool, and Alira, standing in the middle of the crowd, felt her heart sink. She had started all of this with one mistake, one thought, yet it was too late to turn back. The marketplace now buzzed with fear, and the fate of the human and his strange fork was about to be decided. Word traveled faster than footsteps in the crowded station. By the time the guards marched the human out of the marketplace, whispers had already turned into rumors. By the time he was pushed through the steel gates of the outer hall, rumors had already grown into fear. And by the time Alira followed the trail of shouting voices, the fear had already become a storm. He hides weapons inside harmless shapes. One alien muttered, his scales trembling as he spoke. They say the human carries a dozen more inside his clothes. Another whispered, clutching his child. Their kind always brings destruction. A third hissed. Spitting on the floor, the fork had become more than metal teeth. It had become a symbol of terror. Every alien who heard the story added a new piece to it. Some claimed the fork could pierce through armor. Others swore it could summon fire with a single touch. None of them had seen it used, but in their minds the human was already guilty. Alira kept walking behind the guards, her chest heavy. Her silver eyes followed the human's calm steps. Even as he was bound by glowing cuffs and surrounded by soldiers, he did not fight. He looked more confused than angry. As if he could not understand why his simple tool had turned into a threat, she bit her lip, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. The streets of Lura Station echoed with cries. Merchants pulled their wares inside. Children peeked from doorways, then hid again when they saw the human's tall figure. Even the lights seemed dimmer, shadows stretching long as the rumor spread. The council chamber stood at the center of the station, carved from black stone and wrapped in silver lines that glowed faintly. It was a place of judgment where disputes were settled and criminals were punished. Now it was where the human would be taken. Alira's heart pounded as she slipped into the growing crowd outside the gates. Inside, the council was already whispering among themselves. "They say it is a hidden blade," one elder rasped. "No, worse, a tool for torture," said another. His eyes narrow. "They are clever, these humans." "Clever and dangerous," a third muttered. The fork lay on the long stone table between them, looking small and ordinary, but surrounded by fear like a shadow. Alira pressed her back to the cold wall, listening to the voices spill out from the chamber. She knew the council well, once they believed a story. Truth mattered less than fear. Her hands shook as she thought of speaking. But what could she say? That she had been wrong? That she had screamed too quickly? Would they even listen? The human stood silently before the council. His hands still bound, he tried again to speak. His voice steady. "This is not a weapon, it is for food." But the words fell flat. Meaningless to alien ears, to them his tone only sounded like calm defiance. The crowd outside roared louder. "Punish him," one voice cried. "Destroy the weapon," another shouted. "Send the human away before he kills us all," came the call from many. Fear was feeding itself. Growing with every heartbeat, Alira swallowed hard. She remembered the way he had placed the fork down in the marketplace. Careful, gentle, no sign of attack. She remembered his eyes. Confused but not cruel. And yet her voice had been the spark that lit this fire. She could not shake the guilt pressing on her chest. The guards brought the fork closer to the elders. One elder reached out with a claw, tapping it against the table. The faint metallic ring filled the chamber. "It is sharp," he said darkly. "Sharp enough to pierce skin. Perhaps bone," another nodded. "Yes, imagine dozens of such tools, hidden, carried, used in silence." The human shook his head, his voice louder now. "No, you do not understand." But the chamber drowned his words with suspicion. Outside, Alira clenched her fists. She wanted to step forward, to say something, anything, but fear held her tongue. What if she defended him and the council turned their anger on her? What if they said she was corrupted by human tricks? Her legs felt heavy, her courage small. The crowd grew restless. Some demanded the human be locked away forever. Others whispered he should be executed before he revealed more hidden weapons. The fear was no longer about the fork. It was about what the human represented. The unknown, the unpredictable, the different. As the debate inside the chamber grew heated, the human lowered his head for the first time. A flicker of frustration crossed his face. He looked at the aliens around him, at the fork on the table, at the guards who gripped their spears tightly. He realized he was standing at the edge of a storm he did not cause. And yet he would be the one crushed by it. Alira felt her throat tighten. She knew she could not remain silent forever. The truth was simple. The fork had never harmed anyone. But lies and fear had already built a mountain, and now the question was whether she had the courage to climb it. The council elder slammed his hand on the table, his voice echoing. "This human will face judgment," he declared. The crowd outside erupted, voices mixing into a thunderous roar. Alira's heart sank as she realized the storm was only beginning. The council chamber was silent except for the soft hum of the glowing lights above. Dozens of alien eyes stared at the human standing in the center, his hands still bound by energy cuffs. On the long black stone table lay the object that had caused all the fear. The fork, small, simple, harmless in his eyes, yet treated as if it were a forbidden weapon. The head elder, A tall creature with scaled skin and a voice like grinding stone spoke loudly. "This human is accused of carrying a hidden weapon into our market." His words echoed across the chamber, carried to the waiting crowd outside through speakers. He will now face trial, and this council will decide his fate. The crowd roared outside, voices mixing, some shouting for exile, others for execution. Fear had poisoned reason, and the fork had become the symbol of human deceit. The guards stood ready, their spears glowing with energy, their eyes fixed on the human's every move. The human raised his head, his calm eyes scanning the faces of the council. He spoke again, his voice steady. "This is not a weapon. It is a tool for eating." But his words meant nothing to them. The language barrier twisted his meaning into strange sounds. What they heard was not defense, but defiance. Elira stood at the edge of the chamber, her chest tight with guilt. Her voice had been the first to cry weapon, and now the whole station echoed with that fear. She wanted to step forward, to tell them she might have been wrong, but her legs felt heavy, her courage trapped under the weight of so many glaring eyes. The elders leaned closer to the fork. Examining it carefully, one ran a claw along its prongs, wincing as it scraped against the sharp tips. "See how it could pierce flesh," the elder growled. Holding it up to the chamber, the crowd gasped through the speakers, their fear fed by the display. Another elder added, "Its shape is strange, unnatural, made to stab silently," they whispered among themselves. Already painting the fork as a hidden blade, Elira bit her lip until it hurt. She remembered the human's calm face in the marketplace, how he had placed the fork on the ground without resistance. There had been no malice in his eyes, no violence in his movements. Why then did everyone see danger? Was it because humans were strangers? Because they were different? The guards shoved the human to his knees, pressing him down as the trial continued. The fork was passed from elder to elder, each adding their own fears, their own suspicions. One said it could be part of a larger weapon. Another said it was a device for torture. The truth was nowhere in their words, only fear and imagination. Finally, the head elder turned to the crowd, his voice booming. "This object is proof of human deceit. They hide death inside harmless shapes." The crowd erupted in anger. Chants of exile him and destroy him filled the air. The human lowered his head, his jaw tight, as if realizing nothing he said would change their minds. Elira's hands trembled. She could not stay silent any longer. Her voice broke through the noise, small at first, but growing stronger. "I saw him. I was there," she shouted. Stepping forward, the crowd hushed. The council turned their eyes to her. She swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "He held it, yes, but he did not attack. He did not use it to harm anyone." The elders frowned, their expressions sharp. One hissed, "And yet you were the one who first cried weapon." "Girl?" Her cheeks burned with shame. "Yes," she admitted, her voice shaking. "I was afraid. I thought it was dangerous. But I watched him. He placed it down gently. He never raised it against us." Her words echoed in the chamber, but whether they carried weight or not, she could not tell. The head elder slammed his claw against the table. "Fear does not vanish with words. We will judge by what we see, not by what we hope." The fork was lifted again, gleaming under the chamber lights. "To us it is sharp, to us it is strange, and so to us it is dangerous." The human looked up at Elira, his eyes steady, almost grateful for the first time. She felt a connection, a silent thread of trust passing between them. Her throat tightened, knowing she had only done a little, and yet it might not be enough. The council announced that judgment would be given at the next dawn. The human was dragged away, his wrists still bound, the fork locked inside a glowing case like a cursed relic. The crowd outside erupted once more, some demanding his death, others calling for exile. The storm of fear showed no sign of ending. Elira watched him disappear into the prison halls, her heart aching with the weight of her own mistake. She whispered to herself, unheard by the council, "It is only a tool, not a weapon." But her words were lost in the roar of fear. That night, the station did not sleep. The fork sat inside the council chamber, glowing faintly in its case. To the aliens, it was proof of human danger, but to the human, it was only a reminder of how fear could turn the simplest thing into a reason for hatred. And to Elira, it was the beginning of a choice. Stay silent and let him be destroyed, or fight against her own people for the truth. The prison cells of Lura Station were not built for comfort. Cold walls hummed with energy fields, and the air smelled of damp metal. The human sat quietly inside his cell, his hands finally freed of cuffs, but his body surrounded by shimmering barriers. He leaned back against the wall, his eyes thoughtful, not angry, not broken, only waiting. Outside, the station pulsed with fear. The fork had been sealed away in a glowing case inside the council chamber. Watched by guards night and day, the people whispered about it as if it were alive, as if it could spring open and burn them all. Children were told to stay indoors. Merchants closed their stalls early. The human had not harmed a single being, yet his presence felt like a shadow across the entire station. Elira could not sleep. She replayed the scene in the marketplace over and over. The shine of metal, the panic in her voice, the fear that spread like fire each time she thought about the human's calm face. Her chest tightened. She had accused him, and now he was treated like a monster. Guilt gnawed at her, but fear of her people's judgment kept her silent. By the next morning, guards brought food to the prisoners. It was a thin paste served in shallow bowls with no tools. Prisoners scooped it with their hands, their dignity stripped away with each bite. But when the bowl was placed in front of the human, he paused. He looked around the cell and noticed something others did not. In the corner sat a small alien child, thin as a shadow, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. The child trembled with hunger but did not reach for his food. His hands were bound by weakness. Not chains, no one paid him any attention. Not even the guards. The human's gaze softened. Slowly the human lifted his bowl, broke off pieces of the paste, and offered them to the child. The boy hesitated at first, eyes wide with fear. But hunger defeated doubt. He reached out, his small fingers brushing against the human's rough hands. The moment he tasted the food, his expression changed from despair to fragile hope. The human smiled faintly, nodding as if to say, "Eat, it is yours, Elira," who had dared to sneak into the prison's outer hall to watch, felt her breath catch. Through the shimmering barrier she saw everything. The human had nothing, yet he still gave. She had heard her people whisper that humans were dangerous, cruel, clever in destruction. But what she saw was something else, something no alien elder had ever spoken of. Kindness. Later that day, the guards decided to test the strange weapon in the council chamber. The fork was placed before them, its prongs gleaming. But no matter how they struck it against stone, no hidden power came forth. It remained only metal. Sharp but silent frustration grew, but fear did not vanish. One elder declared, "Its power is hidden," waiting for the right hand to awaken it. The crowd believed him, because fear was easier to trust than truth. Back in the cell, the human saw the child struggling again. The paste was too soft, spilling between his small fingers. The human sighed, closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at the guard standing outside. With slow gestures, he pointed to his mouth, then mimed holding something in his hand. He tried to explain without words. The guard frowned, confused, but eventually brought a tray with simple eating tools for other prisoners. Long sticks, small scoops, but the human only shook his head. He tapped his chest, then pointed toward the glowing case far beyond the prison door, where the fork was locked away. Elira's eyes widened. She understood. He wanted the fork, not to fight, not to escape, but to feed the child. Her heart pounded as she realized the truth. What they had called a weapon was simply a tool of kindness, a way to share food with dignity. The guard laughed harshly, shaking his head. "No tricks, human. You will not touch it again." But the human did not grow angry. Instead, he tore off a piece of food, shaped it carefully with his fingers, and placed it gently into the child's mouth. The boy smiled weakly, chewing slowly. It was clumsy, but it worked, and the kindness behind the act shone brighter than any blade. Elira turned away, tears pressing against her eyes. Her people would never believe what she had seen unless she told them. But if she spoke again, louder this time, they might call her a traitor. Still, could she stay silent while an innocent being was condemned? Her chest ached with the weight of the choice. That night, the human sat in silence, the child asleep beside him. Other prisoners watched quietly, their fear of him slowly melting into respect. No speeches, no grand gestures, only small acts of kindness. And yet those acts carried more strength than all the weapons of the station combined. In another chamber, the elders met once more. They spoke of judgment, of punishment, of exile or death. But Elira thought of the human's gentle hands, feeding a starving child with nothing but patience and care. She realized the galaxy was about to make a mistake far greater than fearing a simple fork. Dawn broke over Lura Station, its metal halls glowing with pale blue light. The council chamber filled with murmurs as aliens gathered. Waiting for judgment, guards stood at every corner, their weapons humming softly. On the long stone table, locked inside a glowing case, rested the fork, shining like a secret everyone feared but no one understood. The human was brought forward, his hands free but his body surrounded by guards. He walked calmly, shoulders straight, his eyes steady. There was no anger, no pleading in his face, only quiet strength. The crowd outside pressed close to the gates, their voices mixing into one storm. "Exile him," shouted one. "Destroy him before he destroys us," cried another. Elira stood at the edge of the chamber, her heart racing. She knew the elders would not forgive easily. She knew her words might be ignored. But after what she had seen in the prison, the human sharing his food, caring for the starving child, she could not stay silent. Her guilt had grown into something heavier, something unbearable. It was time to speak. The head elder rose, his scaled body towering over the chamber. "Today we judge the human," his voice rumbled. "He carried a hidden weapon into our marketplace, a tool meant for death disguised as something small. We will decide if he may live, or if his presence is too dangerous for our people." The chamber grew silent, the air thick with expectation. The fork was lifted out of its case, the prongs catching the light. The elder held it high as if it were proof of every fear spoken in whispers. "Look at this," he growled, "sharp, unnatural, forged for piercing flesh." The crowd outside gasped, their fear swelling, but before the elder could speak again, Elira stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "It is not a weapon," she cried. The chamber turned to her, every eye heavy with suspicion. The elders frowned, the guards tensed, but she did not stop. "I was the one who first called it a weapon," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I saw the shine of metal and I panicked. I thought it was dangerous. I made everyone afraid. But I was wrong." Her words hung in the air. Heavy and sharp, the head elder narrowed his eyes. "You would defend the human now," he hissed. "After you were the first to cry out against him." Elira swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "Yes, because I saw what he truly is. I saw what he did when no one was watching. He shared his food with a starving child. He asked for the fork not to fight, not to escape, but to feed the weak with dignity." Gasps rippled through the crowd, whispers racing from mouth to mouth. Elira's voice grew stronger. "That tool is for eating, not killing. It is not a hidden blade. It is a gift of life." The human watched her quietly, his eyes steady, almost grateful. He did not understand her words, but he understood her courage for the first time. Someone stood beside him, not against him. The elder slammed the fork against the table, its metallic ring echoing. "Lies," he growled. "A sharp tool can always be turned to harm. What proof do you bring?" Elira's chest tightened, but she stepped closer. "Let him show you," she said firmly. "Give him food, give him the fork, let him prove it before all." The chamber erupted with debate, voices clashing. Some elders demanded silence. Others murmured about testing the human's intent. The crowd outside leaned in, straining to hear. Finally, the head elder raised his claw, silencing the noise. "Very well," he said coldly. "We will test the human's tool. If it is harmless, let him prove it before us. If it is dangerous, he will reveal his true nature." A guard placed a bowl of thick food on the table, the kind prisoners were given. The fork was set beside it, its metal prongs gleaming under the lights. The human looked at it, then at the faces surrounding him. Slowly he stepped forward, picked up the fork and sat before the bowl. The chamber held its breath. The guards gripped their spears, ready to strike at the first sign of danger. But the human did not attack. He did not raise the fork like a weapon. Instead, he dipped it gently into the food, lifted a portion, and brought it to his mouth. He chewed slowly, then looked up at them, his expression calm. It was not violence, it was a meal. The crowd murmured, confused, uncertain. The human took another bite, then motioned toward Elira, offering her some. She froze, her heart pounding. But then she stepped forward and accepted. He handed the fork to her with steady hands. No force, no fear, only trust. She tasted the food, her silver eyes shining as she turned back to the council. "Do you see?" she whispered. "It is only for this." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. But then one elder slammed his fist against the table, his voice sharp. "Deception," he barked. "He hides his true purpose. He wants us to lower our guard." Others nodded. Unwilling to release their fear, the crowd outside split, some whispering that it was harmless, others shouting that it was a trick. Elira's heart sank. Even truth was not enough to break the chains of fear. She realized now that proving the fork harmless would not end this trial. The council wanted control, and fear gave them power. They would never admit they had been wrong. The human placed the fork back on the table gently, then raised his hands once more, showing peace, not war. But his fate was still uncertain, trapped between fear and truth. And Elira knew the fight had only just begun. The council chamber shook with divided voices. Some elders whispered that the fork was harmless. Others insisted it was a trick. The crowd outside was split as well, fear clashing with doubt, suspicion fighting curiosity. And in the middle of it all stood the human, calm, silent, refusing to show anger even as the storm of judgment swirled around him. The head elder raised his claw for silence, his eyes burning. "This human is too dangerous to remain here," he declared, "even if the fork feeds rather than kills. Its sharpness proves the threat, and if one object can hide such secrets, what else do humans carry?" His words fed the fear like dry wood catching fire. Cries of agreement rose from part of the crowd. "Exile him, send him away." "And the risk," but Elira stepped forward again. Her voice steady, though her hands trembled. "You speak of fear, not truth," she said. "You saw him use the fork to eat. You saw him share it with me. You saw there was no weapon here, only a tool. If we punish him now, we are not protecting our people. We are destroying trust with lies." The elders glared at her, anger flashing in their eyes. "You defend a stranger against your own people," one elder hissed. "Would you betray us for him?" Elira's throat tightened. But she forced herself to stand tall. "I defend the truth," she answered. "And the truth is that we are afraid of something we do not understand." The chamber fell into tense silence. The human watched her quietly. His eyes filled with a kind of gratitude she had never seen before. It was not loud, not dramatic, but it was powerful. That silent bond gave her strength. At that moment, a guard burst into the chamber, dragging a small figure forward. It was the starving child from the prison, the one the human had fed. The boy's thin frame shook as he pointed at the human, his voice weak but clear. He gave me food," the child whispered. "He shared when no one else did. He used the fork, not to hurt me but to help me." Gasps filled the chamber. The crowd outside grew restless, the elders shifted uneasily, their authority shaken by the voice of an innocent child. The head elder growled, "Children speak with soft minds, easily deceived, easily used," but the boy stood firm, his small body trembling yet unbroken. "No, he is kind. He is not a monster." "You're wrong." The word struck deeper than any weapon. The crowd outside murmured louder now, doubt spreading like cracks in stone. If a starving child had seen kindness in the human, how long could the council cling to fear? The head elder's voice boomed again, trying to regain control. "We cannot let one act blind us to danger. What if the fork is harmless but his people bring worse? What if this kindness is a mask?" But before he could continue, the human stepped forward, lifting his hand. The guards tensed, spears raised, but he made no move to attack. Instead, he reached for a piece of bread from the tray near the elders and broke it into smaller parts. He picked up the fork, speared one piece, and handed it carefully to the child. The boy accepted it with shining eyes, eating with dignity rather than desperation. The chamber grew still. No words could twist that act into violence. No fear could erase what everyone had seen. The human had no weapon, no plan of war, only kindness and patience. Even some elders lowered their eyes. Ashamed of their harsh words, Elira felt her chest lighten. As if hope itself had entered the chamber, she turned to the crowd, her voice rising above the silence. "Look at him, look at what he does. While we feared, while we shouted, he gave. We said the fork was a weapon. But in his hands it became a gift. We should learn from this. Not destroy it." The crowd erupted into debate, some cheering her courage, others still clinging to fear. But the balance had shifted. The storm no longer belonged only to fear. For the first time, hope had entered the voices of her people. The head elder slammed the table, his pride wounded. "This changes nothing," he growled. "He is still a risk, and I will not allow humans to unsettle our ways." But his voice no longer carried the same power. The people were watching, their hearts torn, no longer united in fear. The turning point had arrived. The galaxy had not yet chosen trust over suspicion, but it had seen a glimpse of another path. Elira knew this was only the beginning of a greater fight, but as she looked at the human standing strong, calm and kind, she believed change was possible. The fork still lay in his hand, simple, harmless, shining under the lights, once feared as a hidden blade, now revealed as a symbol of peace, and in that moment, the fate of both human and alien rested not in fear, but in the courage to accept the truth. The council chamber was no longer a place of judgment. It had become a battlefield of voices. Fear against truth, pride against kindness. The head elder roared for silence, but the crowd outside had already chosen to speak for themselves. No longer whispers, no longer hidden doubts, but loud cries that shook the halls. "Let him live," some shouted. "He brought no harm," others called. A few still clung to fear, demanding exile, demanding chains. But their voices were weaker now. The tide was turning. The human stood quietly in the center. The fork still in his hand, he did not raise it as a weapon. He did not hold it with pride. He held it gently, like a simple tool, nothing more. But in the eyes of the people, it had become something greater. Elira stepped beside him, her voice carrying through the chamber. "You feared him because he was different. You feared his tool because you did not understand. But what has he done since the moment we saw him? He placed the fork down. He showed peace, he fed a child, he shared with me. He gave us every chance to see the truth, and we chose fear instead." The chamber fell into silence. Even the guards lowered their spears, uncertain now. The head elder's scales shimmered with anger, his pride refusing to bend. But for the first time, his voice was not the loudest in the room. Beyond the council, word spread fast. Messengers carried the story through the station. Then across ships docked at its ports, soon it traveled to nearby colonies. Carried in voices, in images, in transmissions, the tale grew. A human came with a hidden weapon, but the weapon turned out to be a tool of peace. Fearful eyes turned curious, hostile whispers softened, and what began as panic in a marketplace was now a story that reached for the stars. On distant planets, merchants laughed when they heard. "They feared a fork," one said, shaking his head. But when they learned how the human used it, to feed a starving child, to share dignity, the laughter faded into respect. Because the galaxy had always seen humans as dangerous survivors. Now for the first time they saw something else. Compassion back in the chamber. The debate raged, the elders clung to fear, unwilling to admit their mistake. But the people pressed against the gates, demanding to see the human, demanding to witness for themselves. One by one voices rose. "Show us, let him prove it again," and so, under pressure, the council allowed it. The human was given food, the fork in his hand once more. This time he did not eat alone. He walked to the edge of the chamber where the barriers had been lowered. He handed food to a guard who had once threatened him. He offered food to an elder who had called for his death. Each time he waited, calm, patient, and slowly suspicion melted. The fork had lost its shadow. It was no longer a feared blade, no longer a cursed relic. It was only what it had always been, a tool of life. But because of fear, it had become something more, a lesson. Elira felt the weight lift from her heart. She had been the one who cried out first. She had set the fear loose. But now she was also the one who stood by him, who spoke the truth when others would not. Her silver eyes glistened as she whispered to him, "They see you now, they finally see you." The human nodded, a small smile touching his lips. He did not need to speak their language. His actions had spoken louder, and soon those actions would travel further than any word. By the next day, the story had reached the galactic net. Across systems and stations, across ships and colonies, beings of every kind spoke of the human and his fork. They were stunned not by war, not by violence, but by the simplicity of it, that a tool mistaken for a weapon could show the difference between fear and trust. That kindness could break through where words could not. In time, forks began to appear in alien markets, not as weapons but as symbols. Some carried them to remind themselves not to judge too quickly. Others placed them in their homes as a sign of peace. And among traders a saying was born, "Do not fear the fork. Learn from the hand that holds it." The Council of Lura Station never admitted their mistake. But they could not silence the galaxy. The people had seen the truth, and the truth spread beyond their reach. For Elira, life had changed forever. She no longer walked with the same fear. She walked with the memory of a human who had faced judgment not with anger, but with patience. And she carried the lesson of the fork in her heart. The human left the station not as an exile, but as a guest. Ships opened their doors to him. Curious eyes turned to kind ones. Wherever he traveled, the story traveled with him. And the galaxy was stunned, not by his strength, not by his weapons, but by his kindness. The fork, once feared as a hidden blade, had become a legend, not a weapon of war, but a symbol of peace. And the galaxy learned that sometimes the greatest power is not destruction, it is the quiet strength of sharing food with a stranger.